Good morning, Emily, and good morning, everybody that's taken the time to share our little adventure into the metal element part 2. And I'd like to thank Emily
Morning.
very much indeed. Emily is an anxiety and wellbeing coach. I'll put her contact details at the bottom of this in the blurb for the YouTube video, so you'll be able to contact her. And Emily has very kindly agreed to come and chat with me about all things metal, from her personal experiences with the elemental energies, and also because she happens to know a few metal people and how that interaction sort of resonates with you, what you observe in other people's behavior, that we might be able to unpick a little bit, because it's very easy to be judgmental of people who have a strong metal energy within them. Remembering always that we are all the elements all of the time.
Mm,
That
mm,
in five element aspect, certainly in traditional acupuncture, we believe that there is one element that we resonate more with than any other. So we sort of call that as the top of the hierarchy. And that informs our habituated response to life before we are even consciously aware of what we've just said or done. So it's really useful, I believe, and Emily and I are passionate about self-development and growing our confidence in ourselves and our worth. It's so useful to be aware of our behaviors, what triggers our thoughts and feelings, because we may not always find them really useful. They may not serve us well, which is a great theme for the metal element. Let go of what doesn't serve us too well.
mhm,
And that self-awareness helps we can start to consciously choose how we respond to any given situation. And we may find that we can refine those processes over time and actually forge more positive, healthy relationships through our lives as a result.
mhm.
So we're not trying to change anybody, in five elements philosophy would certainly not be looking to change anybody else. It's more about self-awareness and how we can choose our response to life. And often that means recognizing our the element that we are most strong in, so that the top of our hierarchy, if you like, and then also developing the breadth and the depth of the other elements that we are all the time. We often draw on those contextually. So given a situation, it would always be a watery response, or it would always be a fiery response. And we do that without thinking. It's just the most
Mm,
natural way to respond. But it may be, if we're too fixed in our groove of our top hierarchical element, we are missing a trick in terms of using the gifts that those other elements bring to us, and give us a range of options as to how we deal with life's invitations for learning, otherwise known as opportunities, challenges, or just downright disasters, and why is it happening to me? So that's why I'm so passionate about the five elements. They give us a real guidebook for life, how to respond to life for best effect for ourselves and the betterment of all. And as we come into autumn, as you can see by the beautiful photograph behind me, we naturally come to the metal element. And as we discussed with Donna and Claire earlier, we're going to look at the bits about metal that can really help us to understand them better, and also to shed a bit of light on those that maybe are still unconscious behaviors that may be not quite serving us as well as they could do. No judgment in anything that we say about the five elements. Nature is not judgmental. The five elements are based on the natural order of things. So we just observe and we understand better, and then that gives us greater choice in how we live our lives. So, Emily, let us start with the metal
Hi.
element. So, of all the aspects of metal, which I go into in great detail in my 2-hour deep dives, which Emily has joyfully joined myself on
Mm,
Claire with throughout an entire year, we have travelled the elements together, but we do this in a lot more detail. If anybody is interested, just check out my website. So, of all the different aspects of metal, Emily, what would you say you are most comfortable with? How do you see your
um,
metal playing out very naturally and very healthily for you?
I think it's the reevaluation, and the reflective aspects of it for me. I think metal allows you to be quite discerning about what to let go and what to stay with. I like the aspect of being able to take time to understand what is working for me and serving me and what isn't, without judgment, and being with a quite sort of a factual overlay, and it sort of removes some of the emotion to it. um, I think it is for me very much a period of reflection, and I'm very much loving reflection, but I know I can hold on to wanting to always be better and bigger and self-improvement and what's next, and sometimes it's okay just to sit and be with what is. And I think for me,
Yes.
that aspects of it allows me to build self-awareness, to consolidate where I am, and to nourish that without needing to desperately rush for the next thing, I think would be a lot of what resonated for me.
Yeah, yeah, and you've picked out some beautiful themes. I mean, that's a really comprehensive living of the metal elemental energy. This self-evaluation, often we find it difficult for ourselves. We often project it onto other people. And we can more often see metal out of balance when we observe other people's behaviors, people who are being
Mm,
incredibly of others. Um, we can set our own boundaries really high, and we want to be very aware of when we're slipping into a more a perfectionist sort of state of play, which I would say is metal out of balance.
mm,
It's a fine line between seeking the best, wanting to be the best version of ourselves, that is extremely metal, and um, when taken in balance, that is a healthy thing, I think. And you and I are in the same business, not that we see it as work, but helping people to really value their gifts, their skills, their personalities, and how then best to put that out in the world for
mm.
betterment. So we're so keen on this, and yet we can observe in others, sometimes ourselves, this almost obsession to make it even better, to make it even more perfect. And anything
Yes.
that falls short of that, we can be quite critical of and maybe quite
Mm,
dismissive.
mhm,
So
mhm.
it's all of what we do with the element is constantly evaluating, are we in a state of balance or are we out of balance? And because we've got lists and lists of behaviors that say, oh, that sneaks into out of balance, being a perfectionist, being hypercritical, self and others, um, beating ourselves up because we have failed to meet our own high standards, not being able to forge deep relationships because others are failing to come up to our high standards. And no matter how much we try to bully them into submission to change, we know actually deep in our hearts that is pointless. Why should they change? They are perfect in
Mm,
themselves.
mm,
It's our desire
mm.
for perfection that can force those fractions in, to force relationships to sort of come apart at the seams. This
Yes.
relentless, I think gentlemen would say, or our partners would say, nagging. Some would say it's a pursuit for excellence and perfection, but it is a fine line, Emily, isn't it? And I think
Absolutely.
just that self-awareness, when we can feel ourselves slipping into more of an obsessive approach, we then want to rein back without
Yeah.
any judgment, and then say, okay, how do I bring this back into a state of balanced
Yes.
appraisal and balanced desire to improve, to develop, whatever. So I think that's really good. Interestingly, I don't think we mentioned this with Donna and Claire, but every element has its own virtue. There are no negatives to the elemental energy. That everything they offer us is a gift, a gift for
Mm,
enjoying life to the full, living a full and healthy life. Where it becomes a challenge is when we slip out of balance. So
mm,
it's not that the element has a negative aspect, it's that when we don't hold that beautiful energy in balance, we will see symptoms, um, effects of that elemental energy out of balance. So always we're being invited to nurture ourselves back into a place of balance, always, because that's where good health, fulfillment, happiness, joy, loving relationships, all of that lives in that state of balance.
mm, mm.
Now, the virtue of metal, which is not an easy one to grasp, is fairness or righteousness. and I'm going to refer to my notes because it's not easy to just ad lib this.
No.
Fairness, impartial and just treatment or behavior without discrimination or favoritism. So we just see things as they are, and we assess that, and we respond accordingly. And there are two ways of looking at this. I was saying to the girls, executions in ancient China only happened in autumn because it was the time of metal. So the case, the behavior of the would-be criminal had been assessed, had been evaluated, a judgment had been given. And if the judgment was execution, that was then to be delivered in the most efficient, non-sentimental, expert, competent way. And the axe should fall cleanly with one blow. We don't want to go, oh, ah, oh, ah, oh, ah, oh. You know, we just want it to be absolutely efficiently, cleanly struck for the benefit of all, one would say. And the executioner isn't judging this person to be bad or good. It is just that the judgment has been handed down, and he will, you know, deliver the execution to the best of his ability. So some would say that can be very cold. I mean, the fire element energy here would be saying, oh, no, poor criminal, but he didn't deserve it. And even if he did, oh, that's awful. You know, and we certainly don't want high fire energy being the executioner, because that would not sit well, frankly, with this delivery of the punishment. So we see that metal can be truly, truly impartial, recognizes what is just, and responds accordingly. And the other way to tune into this, because all the while we're looking for little prompts in nature, in life around us, that helps us to reconnect quickly with the elemental energy. And the other one is with animals. When we talk about humans and self-respect, which is a theme for humans in the metal energy, ask, do the animals engage in respect? No. They engage in evaluation, which is one of your key themes. We are evaluating that animal, friend or foe, danger or you know, something to be neutral about, and we respond accordingly. So we're not going into great sort of judgments and sentimentality, and we're not putting human beliefs onto the animal kingdom. And I always get slightly uncomfortable when people look at animal behavior and then put a human overlay over it, and then are horrified at what they are seeing in front of them. Because if that was happening to a human, that would be unacceptable. And I think actually that's distorted, that's out of balance. What we want to be doing is observing animal behavior, evaluating justly and impartially, and responding accordingly. And that brings us to the spirit of metal. Each element has its own spirit, so own ethereal quality. And the spirit of metal is the Po, or the corporeal soul. So intrinsically placed within us as part of our metal element energy is this ability to act instinctually. And that is without the human overlays. Now, I'm sure there'll be viewers who maybe say, well, hang on a minute, you know, we are much more refined than that. We are, you know, we are much higher in the pecking order as sentient beings. And I would say, well, we may be according to human evaluation, but you know, as far as the animal kingdom, I'm not convinced we're right up there, frankly. But so we really want to be in touch with our instincts, to respond in that impartial way without over complicating it and over layering it that we humans like to do. And the other aspect of that virtue is righteousness. And let me read this, because this is just reading the words puts us in touch with the metal, which is about being inspired by something bigger than ourselves. The subjugation of the self to what ultimately lies above, which is the will of heaven. This is corresponding to divine justice. Heaven gives and takes away according to its own divine plan, that loss and grief may be healed. The standard for righteousness lies in rectifying the self not rectifying others. So what is of most essential worth is generally the least substantial. We can go without food for days and survive. We go without air, without oxygen, we're dead in minutes. So there's our spiritual connection to the heaven above is what sustains us through the breath, rather than the material possessions that we can often cling to or crave or search for and accumulate and hoard, because we're trying to find some value in something outside of ourselves. So I loved what you said about constant process of evaluation in order to better yourself. And that is just metal through and through and through. And it's wonderful because I get the impression with you, this is more a daily ritual than something you do once a year in the season of autumn.
Yes, I think for me, I think I've learned that reflection. I use journaling as a process to record and sort of a dynamic way of creating a reflective space, and it's something that's served me so well, and it's really helped with the sort of not feeling necessarily enough sometimes, maybe quite a busy mind, and to bring that into a space of reflection, it really helps consolidate by seeing where you've come from, not just where you're going to, and just to sort of bring all that into one place in a stillness that allows it to absorb and come together, if you like, and be observed and be in a state of awareness, so that you can really kind of soak that in. I think that's really, really useful. So reflection and reevaluation is a key point for me. And also being able to, as part of that, being able to let go perfectionism and let go all that you're not, so that you can see all that you are as well. And in a sense that there is no perfection, there is no I should be this, I should be the other. It allows me, that reflective space allows me to let go of should. Yes. And to embrace all that is. Yes. So yeah, reevaluation, reflection is the metal bits that I've really had to learn, and now they serve me very well. I wouldn't say I was naturally that way at all to start with. So they're tools that I always advocate in my work, because it's just so nourishing, and it just broadens your view. When you can, it'd be so easy to latch onto a sort of a continuous, I must be more, always looking forward and not taking a moment to take stock of where you are, where you've arrived at, really.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And certainly for most of us who perhaps don't have metal very high up in our hierarchy, it can be a learned discipline as opposed to something that comes naturally. But my goodness, when we start to get into the detail of these elemental gifts and realize, just by being more consciously aware and bringing them into our lives, how much richer our lives can be outside of the tram tracks that we have regularly traveled, because this is the way we've always done it, and this is the way we'll always do it, because we don't know any other way. And we know from our coaching work how limiting that is, how confining that is.
And I think also there can be a tendency, if we carry on that track, to let emotions take over. And I think what I like about metal is, and I've been around people that are more metal, is they're able to almost be a little bit more dispassionate, a little bit more factual about the way they look at things. And that, in removing the emotion, it allows us to see a wider picture. And I think emotion can sometimes naturally cloud us being able to see that, have that clarity. So I think by adopting, I think this is why it's so wonderful, every single element offers a gift and something. For me, what metal really allows me to do is to just stand right back and see everything as it is, as opposed to an emotional overlay. And emotions have their part to play and are important, but sometimes they can distort, in my opinion and experience, and maybe cloud seeing that whole picture. So to be able to bring in elements of metal to serve us, I think, is to allow you that ability to, I suppose in some ways maybe be more animalistic, in the sense that perhaps they haven't got the emotions and the sophistication of that thinking that we have, and therefore they deal with things in what I think sometimes is perhaps a more nourishing way. I mean, if we look at an animal and how it will, what it will do after it's been threatened, perhaps, like, you know, if it's an animal that's been threatened by a predator, and it will then shake afterwards to get rid of all that tension, all that built up, pent up fear going into the stress response that freeze, fight, flight does, and it will reset. Whereas as humans, we'll overthink, will it happen again? Is it likely to happen again? And we keep that stress cycle going, and we feed it and we feed it. Whereas the animal's drawn a line, it's dispensed with all that bodily sort of absorption of the tension, and it's moved on and it's reset. So I think there's a lot to be learned about how to manage that emotion, that emotional resilience that comes from harnessing and understanding aspects of metal. Sorry, that was very long.
No, that was perfect. I mean, I was thinking the same as you was talking about animals. Because metal is about the dying process, that it is about
True.
the enterings and the exitings, it is the ending part of the beginnings and the endings. And often we really resist that, don't we? And it's easy for me to say, because I'm not facing a life-threatening health challenge at the moment. And for those that are, some like Sir Chris Hoy, I just read the other day that he's been given a terminal cancer illness.
Yeah.
And you think, my goodness, a man like that, with 2 to 4 years to live, and he's already into the first year of the 2 to 4 years. So the inevitability and the way he has chosen to approach that is very sanguine. It is it's actually quite upbeat. It's surprisingly positive for somebody whose life was so rich and based on physical health to be, taken very early from this life. He is approaching his ending rapidly, but is very, very positive about it. So isn't going into why did this happen to me? The more victim mentality. He is owning it, he is standing up to it, and he is embracing it and making it the best that it can be in for the years he has left, which I would say is a very metal approach. And in fact, looking at his complexion, metal is the color white. Each of the elements has its own color association. Metal is white. That's not skin color. That is it's almost like a powder dry look on the face. So you can see through makeup, through skin tone, through skin color. There's like this powdery dryness, because metal is also a drying environmental factor. And I've always thought he was quite metallic in his way. He was always quite understated. He wasn't, rah, rah, rah. Just a very modest man, a very contained man. And these are things that you would say were metal. Taking everything from the outside, bringing it in for evaluation, and then coming out with a sort of reasoned response that wasn't going to be, as you said, swept away by emotion as fire.
Yes.
Certainly swept away by righteous indignation. If wood is anywhere, if it's not fair, that'll be wood with its hands on his head. That's not fair. Fire will be in floods. Each of the elements will have its own response to something like that. But I've always felt with him, you could almost say he was slightly aloof. And that's what often metal element energy, when it's at the top of the hierarchy, is accused of: uncaring, too dissociated, too detached. But it is absolutely exquisitely a representation of taking everything in from the outside, drawing it inwards for evaluation. And that takes time, and it takes stillness, it takes quietude. Can't be done in the hubbub and the noise and the storytelling and the narratives, and it just wants that quiet reflection, evaluation, for sure. So that's really interesting, isn't it, that we can observe that in other people and jump, depending on the orientation of our elements, what our hierarchical order looks like, jump to conclusions that they just don't care, because they're not reacting wildly or going, that, in sentimentality, which would be earth out of balance. Oh, that's so terrible. I feel for all the starving whatever's in the world, Yes, absolutely, we all do. But let's bring that into a place of compassion and not over sentimentality. Whatever.
I find metal people very grounding, and they're almost like, for somebody, I think I'm Earth. For somebody that's Earth, they're very good for regulation, emotional regulation, and I find them incredibly grounding. They will bring lots of logic, lots of fact. They won't attach and jump on that emotional wave. In fact, I stood back looking and taking in account of everything, and it's very. Put that together with an Earth, and it's wonderful, because it's just so grounding. It's just so like an anchor.
Yes.
So I think it's really good to look at combinations of people. I always think about this. I know we've talked about it before in terms of teams and having a team of people and everyone that's sort of a very cohesive unit. And I can imagine metals play a really wonderful part in creating some of that.
Yes, for sure. And that's where, we are our own team, aren't we? If we can develop all
Yeah.
the elemental energies and bring all of their gifts out and manifest them, we are the whole deal. We are the complete deal on legs. We can,
Yes.
we have all of the resilience, the resources to deal with anything in life. And especially if we've got that flexibility and agility that says, right, this is a wood energy type situation. Let's bring in my visioning, let's bring in my planning and my decision making. Or this is a survival issue, which will be water. I am now going to assess very rapidly what the danger is, and I'm going to leg it out of here. So we have such a breadth and depth to our personalities, to our toolkit as a life strategy. We've got it all. And often we can see what we're lacking, or I would say underdeveloped, because all of these lovely skills and qualities are within this, but just by virtue of not getting them out, dusting them off, polishing them up, because that's what metal would do, we're not utilizing them enough to be able to bring them in almost by default. So we see that in other people, say, oh, I'd love to be like that. And then we say, well, actually, I can be like that. Perhaps not to that degree. If their hierarchy is different, if wood is our lowest energy, we're not suddenly going to be like a wood hierarchy, top of the tree with wood, top of the tree, top of the list with wood overnight. But we can certainly nudge wood up a little bit in the hierarchy
Absolutely.
and make it more accessible.
Yes.
Because who wouldn't want to be able to plan and make decisions in a good, timely way for growth and expansion? Who wouldn't want to do that? So,
And that's the beauty in it, isn't it?
yeah.
I feel it's almost like some of the work I do with people around anxiety is where we need to sort of we look at tuning in to see where they're at and what they most need, and getting used to the feel of where the body is and what that what that's telling them. Oh, where's the focus of attention and what's that creating? What's that telling them? And I almost feel as an opportunity with the elements in understanding them better in the great work that you do to tune in and say which quality, which characteristic of which element could serve me well right now. And just asking that question would be so enabling.
Yes.
Really would.
Yes, because we haven't got to reach far for it. It's not like
No.
we have to go on a course. We don't have to pay money for it. It's more understanding what that element will offer us and then literally bringing it out, dusting it off and playing with it. Using it, good practice makes permanence. Using it often more consciously. Yeah, absolutely. What gift do I need right now, and where does that sit in terms of the elements?
Yes.
Sure, because there will be an answer to every perceived problem. We have our own solution within the 5 elements. That is my firm belief, firm conviction. And it's interesting you deal with anxiety, and I'm sure, and I know from your work, there is a lot of evidence-based research that says the breath forms an enormous part in changing our mood, in changing our physiological state, especially in terms of managing stressful responses, almost like a trigger to stress response.
Definitely.
And the breath comes with metal, because the 2 officials that are relating to the metal element are the lungs and large intestine.
Yeah, of course.
So most of us will do very shallow breathing, won't we? And that means we don't have a lot of resilience when we're placed in a stressful situation, because we're so used to going and mouth, not even nose breathing, and to learn how to breathe properly and to utilize breathing techniques to calm our physiological stress response is a gift beyond many others, because it's free and we can do it with a simple bit of, you can Google it, or we can go on a course, but it's a really easy thing to master, to just manage the breath.
So we've always got it with us, and it's what I love about the breath is it happens now as well. So it's an anchor to now, and it brings you into the moment, and it's always accessible. And there's so many different types of breathing techniques that you can do. Ones that help induce a state to sleep more so, 4-7-8 towards the end of the evening. But yeah, you're right. It's lovely that it's aligned with metal, actually, because it is one that enables you to literally transform. It's almost like a hack to the nervous system in terms of whether you want the relaxation response or the stress response. It sends all those neurotransmitters and does amazing things. So yeah, breath. And I love the fact that it's within metal, actually, because it kind of sits really well with me, with opening up that state of being, that a relaxed state opens up, of being aligned, grounded, and being able to see more clearly, because
Yes,
our emotional brain, the amygdala, is sort of dialed down, if you like, and our prefrontal cortex dialed up. So we get this lovely metal state of being able
yes,
to see things and understand things, and make sense of it. And this evaluation, such a great, I love that lung, it makes sense, doesn't it, that lungs and
it
breathing is
makes
sort of aligned. Yeah.
exactly, it makes sense. And I just love, if we're not certain what any element does, look outside in the window in its corresponding season. So
Yeah,
when
that's a
we
good point.
see, when internally we are dying for dying, see, the words are metal. Isn't it funny, when we attune
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
elemental energy, the vocabulary changes and
absolutely.
aligns with the energetic of that elemental signature. So we are dying for clarity. We desperately need clarity in our lives. Look out of the window. The leaves are falling off the trees. We see the tree for the first time since March, probably February. We see the tree for what it is, the actual shape of the tree and its branches, which is so much easier to identify the types of trees when they haven't got leaves on them, because the way they grow, you cannot mistake an oak because it grows up like that. It just is.
Mm,
And a
mm,
maple will always grow like that, and the branches are like that. So it's so much easier to see the true nature of something when all of the frippery, the extraneous superficialities, not saying leaves are, but when it's all
mm,
stripped back bare to the core essence of what it is, my goodness, and we stay out of judgment, out of an emotional narrative that we have maybe affixed to something, attached to something. If we just look and say, wow, that's an oak. It's neither this nor that.
know that.
It just is. And we can look at life like that, in those moments when we're
Mm,
so caught up in the drama, so caught up in the narratives. And, there's as many narratives as there are people on the planet. And it's so terribly overwhelming and confusing. Actually,
mm.
do what Emily does. Find a quiet place of stillness within. Often it helps to have a bit of stillness without, unless you're a real guru. Um,
Yeah.
find a little bit of stillness without, and a lot of stillness within, and just strip it all back. Get to the
Mm,
core essence of what it is that we are struggling with, and allow the clarity to flow from that
yeah.
impartial evaluation of circumstance.
It's
And
funny
then
how,
the response will flow.
yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I totally
Yeah.
concur with what you're saying. Is that almost like when you let go, the answer rises to the surface and finds you. And it's the most bizarre thing, because we're trying to find it and we're going to hold on really, really rigidly, and it's got to be there and it has to be structured. But actually, as you say, the leaves let go, we see it, it finds us, it becomes clear. And it's so funny because it always feels like the wrong way around, because our brains are obviously, their job is to think and to try and find answers. But it's like that aha moment. As soon as you're in the shower relaxed, you get the answer you spent 2 hours trying to sketch out in a pad. So yeah, I totally,
Forcing it.
yeah,
That is
yeah,
it. And
forcing it.
that's the large intestine. So we all know that we shouldn't force any
Of
external
course,
evacuation
yes.
from the body, because we will suffer for it. But the large intestine is a marvelous indicator, both on so we get physiological symptoms of balance or imbalance. We get emotional signals. We get mental sort of, symptoms. So many ways that we can discern whether we are imbalance in that element or not. And the large intestine, anybody that suffers from constipation, your metal element is out of balance. It's as simple as that. Anybody that is perpetually suffering from chest infections, viral chest, maybe it goes into pneumonia, or is lots of phlegminess or sinusy type stuff, anything that clogs the breath, the clear flow of breath in and out of the body, definitely metal will be depleted. No doubt about it, because unless obviously you have some inherited um, condition, we are born with it. We're not going to just turn that around because, oh, well, the metal's out of balance if we've got that. No,
Mm, mhm.
that. So we'll just keep it clear and in perspective. If it's something that we acquire through life, then often our greatest weakness is the element that is most depleted or out of balance, is where the pathogens will sneak in. And if we've got
Mhm.
a repeated history of chest infections, of bowel disorders, diarrhea, constipation, IBS-y type stuff, then it's because the metal element is depleted. And it gives
Mm.
us a place to start to hone in on and say, how do I restore balance back to my system? And there'll be
Mm.
many strategies on mental, physical, emotional, spiritual ways that we can do that, depending on where we feel the greatest challenge is. And of course, with metal, get yourself out of the 3D mundane world as often as you can and go into the place of majesty, of awe and wonder.
Mhm.
And as you said, Emily, bringing yourself into the now moment. So going for a walk, if you have that luxury, especially on a day like today, the sun is shining, the leaves are a riot of colour.
Mm.
For the moment,
Mm.
it's dry where I live in the Midlands. The leaves are, as you're scuffing through multicoloured leaves, there's still a warmth to the sun, but you can just feel the energy start to pull into the sort of more yin fashion.
Mm.
And then you just stop and think, why do I get so het up about X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
When I could just see the beauty and the bliss around me. Let me attune to that in the stillness, then come home,
Mm.
sit down refreshed with a more inspired energy around me, letting go of all those frustrations and those hurts and woundings and words and
Mm.
dismisses and all that, and just go, right, let's just look at this with clarity, with impartiality. And metal will never let us down. But if we hold on, oh dear, large intestine, if we hold on to the slights, the resentments, the resistance,
Yeah.
we are just
Yeah.
storing up problems for another day,
Absolutely.
and we won't get the clarity at all. Brilliant. Oh, we're all set for a walk now.
Everyone's going to
I
walk.
just can't wait to get out there with the dog. Anything at all to close with, Emily, on metal that you'd like to note, either self or others? Observation.
I think it's just such a good regulator, as you said there. I think the senses that you can get from a walk, the crunching sound of the leaves, the smell of the leaves, the colours of the leaves. There's so many things that ground our senses that we can take in from autumn, which obviously aligns with the metal season. And I think it's all, like you say, it just sets you up for that sense of groundedness, that connectedness, that soothing relaxation response. Our vagus nerve can activate, and everything becomes so much clearer to see and so much more accessible. And it's almost like you say, a walk allows us to let go so that we can let in. And it's such a great thing. It's all there if we look for it. And I like the way you said there. And just look, if you're stuck with what you need, just look out for nature, for what it's doing as your cues to what you can emulate, take, or use as an example, to really kind of get the most out of the season, really, and the metal energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. All makes
And it's
sense.
a good point to close in. Just a reminder that yes, we have the season of metal, which happens once a year, around about this time. But
Hmm.
actually, each of the elements has its own power time during a 24-hour day.
Yeah, good
So
point.
we don't have to wait to do all of this evaluation and letting go and being inspired in the autumn, although it's always
Autumn. Yeah.
helpful. We can
Yeah.
actually do it every day. And for metal, the power hours for the lung are between 3 and 5 in the morning, and for the large intestine, it's between 5 and 7. So it's no great surprise on a more earthy level that we go to the loo for generally when we get up and start moving around. Everything
Yeah.
starts. We're letting go of the old stuff that's been accumulated overnight, and we're making room for the new experiences, the new food, the new intake of inspiration, ideas. We're making space for that by letting it go. So often people wake up at 3. It's quite
Mm.
a particular hour for people with sleep difficulties. Between around about 3 is a really tricky time. Um, my mother used to work for Samaritans and Widows Cruise, and often people who were contemplating suicide, the most challenging time of the day would be before dawn, the
Mm.
darkest part of the long night dark of the soul, or dark night of the soul. the before the dawn, because the dawn, this rising of the sun, brings the fiery optimism that everything will be okay, based on nothing whatsoever apart from this innate knowing everything will work out. Just hang on. So it's before that, this sort of deepest, darkest place for people, and often that means wakefulness, and then that sort of the anxiety builds because of the pensiveness, the worrying, the thinking, the anxiety, and we're just not connecting with that higher sense of something bigger than all of us. And it's not a religious thing. I make that point very clearly. This is a spiritual philosophy based in nature. So it's not about a God figurehead or a religious, externalizing of our own power and seeking it in something else. That would be out of balance. It's recognizing the divinity within. It's being able to take in all of that beautiful goodness, bringing it in and finding deep within us that diamond in the dross, that perfect, most valuable sense of who we are at our core essence, and valuing that. So, what other people think of us is of interest, maybe, but mostly irrelevant. The only thing that matters is, and we know this as coaches, if you don't feel valued by other people, how much is that a reflection of how you value yourself? Do you find worthiness, value in yourself? Because you won't have that, you won't be resonating at that frequency and attracting that from others if you are feeling without value in self. So somewhere in all that quiet contemplation, and for the lung, at the time its most strongest ability to connect with something beyond the mundane is between 3 and 5. So if you wait between 3 and 5, maybe a little reframe is possible, rather than going, oh my God, I can't sleep, and then getting anxious and worried. Actually use that beautiful poetic time to tune in to the greater universe with awe and wonder, and to feel that within you. We are awesome beings of light who have off days when we're out of balance, and we can all accept that without judging it. But in truth, in essence, we are beautiful divine beings of light. Let us celebrate and embrace that.
What a lovely moment to end on. Light.
What a perfect moment to end on. Thank you, Emily, for your time and your energy and your beautiful observations and sharings. That's meant an awful lot to me. Really enjoyed it. And roll on winter next, but let's not rush through autumn. Let's enjoy autumn.
Let's absorb it. No, wonderful. Very awe-inspiring. Thank you so much.
It's my absolute pleasure, my darling. I'm just going to find a way. Thank you to everybody that's listening. And if you want to know more, please contact me. Thank you, Emily. Wishing you a beautiful day.